Okay. It is another Thursday night, and the date is June the 27th, 2024. Welcome to another broadcast of WLJA Radio Common Law Under God. We um, we have a couple people on now, and we did have besides Frank and Melissa. Um, we're going to before we start much of anything else. Keith is back. Hi, Keith. I had a question for you. I guess you're still. We're asking
Go
everybody.
ahead.
Um, yeah, I'll ask it after I do the prayer, but I just wanted people to mute their mic and if you're not speaking, and then
Yeah,
of
I can
course.
hear you guys.
Okay, good. Um, Melissa, can you hear us? Okay.
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. All right. All right, so back to everybody being muted, and I'm going to do the prayer. Uh, Heavenly Father, thank you for yet another opportunity to meet with those who want to honor your name, your incomprehensible power, wisdom, and loving patience with our failings. As you know, Heavenly Father, too many of us have forgotten to stop fearing man and start revering you. We seek your guidance tonight as we explore the limits of our earthly power to disarm the forces of Satan, which we have foolishly allowed to become strong. We know that when we put our faith in your wisdom, there is nothing we cannot do, and through you, and that you cannot do for us. Please teach us how to be your instruments as we seek the wisdom to use your sacred law to further disarm the adversary, since our Lord Jesus Christ blotted out the ordinances that have been afflicting us, nailing them to the cross, as our brother Paul, your faithful disciple, told us so long ago. Thank you for the signs that we're beginning to see that the enemy is in some sort of a retreat mode, possibly. And please grant us the wisdom to be able to stand firm, fasten on the belt of truth, and protect ourselves with the breastplate of your righteousness, Heavenly Father, so that we do not again slip into complacency, false doctrine, and self idolatry, as we all have had such a great tendency to do in the past. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. Okay. Um, yeah, we're the topic tonight is one of the forms of relief that our common law courts are considering um, to place in our judgments. And we don't need to skip ahead to how are we going to ever enforce those? When the time is right, we will be able to enforce those with the help of God. But in the meantime, if we don't construct the infrastructure, if we continue to ignore um, Genesis 1:26, uh, telling us uh, to take dominion over His creation, the land, air, and water, everything that lives in those places. If we don't do those things, then we're not going to be in a position to put on the full armament of God, and we're going to need every bit of that, regardless of what God's plan ultimately is for right now. But I don't think any of us claim to know um, what exactly is going on, but we know what He has told us in His book. And one of those things is to take care of business. Um, and we sure haven't been doing that. We won't even talk about it. I keep bringing it up on social media. Genesis 1:26. Let's take dominion over God's creation, like He told us to right at the beginning, right before the first fall. Remember? Um, and nobody will even talk about it. So I would imagine doing it is even, going to be more difficult. However, and this is where I get into the question for Keith, because I think he and I have discussed the phenomenon known as Maywood, California, and wanted to update some people on that. As you may recall, I think we've mentioned it in prior broadcasts, that Maywood, California was that city that had it up to their eyeballs in what they believed and may still believe was merely corruption of their mayor and just about everybody else. I get the impression Maywood, California is a pretty small place. I will also remind people there are places all over the American continent that have unincorporated counties. Imagine that. And they have, of course, unincorporated cities, too, a lot of them. So we're not talking about taking apart Washington, D.C., okay? We're talking about disarming, a town, disarming a few corrupt individuals that have been making their lives miserable and draining the public treasuries. That's probably where I would think we would start, in any case. What do you remember about that, Keith, about the Maywood, California matter? I know it's not the only one, it's just the only one I can find these days. Are you still there, Keith? I don't know if we lost him. I'm showing he's muted. Keith?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, do you remember when we talked about Maywood, California, and I want to...
Right.
Were you aware that there were some other towns besides Maywood, California, who had done the same thing? You there?
Yeah, I thought I had heard that there were some other towns too that were kind of, doing the same thing out there as well.
Okay, this was reported on like 8 years ago in by the New York Times, which in itself kind of makes you scratch your head. Why would they report on something like this? Why would they report on it honestly if that's even what happened? Good grief. City of Maywood is in Los Angeles County? All right, well, and they weren't so tiny. They had a population of, or do have, of 28,000 and some. It's not huge, but 3.1 kilometers square. Unfortunately, I think the latest is that after they fired everybody, they started looking at the books and they found out that things were even less copacetic than they thought they would be. And but instead of seeking a remedy with a common law court, of course, they went the exact wrong direction. And I think they're filing something in federal court. Let's see. City of Maywood, California. They're on Facebook. Of course they are. Yeah, they were founded 100 years ago. Anyway, they found the success part is that they fired everybody except maybe a couple of people, the guy that ran the water department, and maybe a few others, and they started self-governing, and they saved a lot of money. It didn't fall apart. Everybody got what they needed. Looks like they're going to have some basketball events. 3 days ago, though, they posted the city of Maywood. The city of Maywood? I don't know if they're still incorporated. Yeah, just because they fired everybody didn't mean that they unincorporated. So they're reminding residents that enforcement officials will be regulating the possession and discharge of all illegal fireworks. I don't know. Sounds like they're sliding back into the old ways. So, yep, complacency is a real problem, and it looks like they're slipping into it. Yeah. Okay, but it worked for them for a while anyway, while they used it. If you disarm the people, even if they are still working for a corporation, if the corporation no longer has an obligation to do anything, and of course none of these corporations, not one of them, has an obligation to protect or serve anybody, then if you fire, well, that's the thing. Maywood approached it the people of Maywood approached it as if they were the ones doing the firing, even though they aren't the ones that created the corporation to begin with. So they had their doctrine wrong, really. In any case, they instead of prosecuting these people, which is what they should have done, in my opinion. I don't live there, but I've seen this over and over. And if anybody is stealing from you, if they're terrorizing you, if they're committing any kind of crime against you, you don't fire them from some entity that you don't even control. You prosecute them. That's what you do. And now we've been hamstrung, as we pointed out in the last broadcast or the one before, maybe a few broadcasts ago, that we don't actually need to form a common law grand jury to prosecute anybody. All we need is the 3-notice process that was given to us by Jesus Christ in Matthew 18:15 through 17. I'm going to I'm going to segue from the last time we were here. We missed doing this little clip, and I don't know, Frank, are you ready to put that on? This is supposed to be advice on what to do if you find that you're being broken into, and it's a conversation between a bar member and somebody else. Have you got that handy, Frank?
Yeah, 1 second.
And I was hoping that I could get you to pause it at certain places where they're probably telling you stuff that's going to get you killed. This is a video interview from, I don't know, a few years ago about dealing with at least what they used to call a home invasion. They don't even consider the possibility that your home could be invaded by people who will claim they're authorized to do this, when of course they aren't. This is an invasion from people who, when you tell them, we're going to call the cops, they get worried. But when you say, well, I'm going to call the cops, and they are the cops, probably not so much so. Anyway, so with that as a background, can you play that for us, Frank?
never do when someone breaks into your home. In this video, we're going to break down 3 topics that someone suggested you should never do when someone breaks into your home. We'll be talking with noted criminal defense attorney and former state prosecutor Tom Grieve. But hey, first let me let you know that we have a gun giveaway going on, and it ends really soon. All you got to do is go down in
well, okay.
description,
Pause
click
it there.
that link, and we'll let you know which
could you
brand
pause
new
it there,
gun
Frank?
you could have a chance to win.
Frank, could you pause it there? Yeah. Interesting that he should talk about a gun giveaway. Because that was, be thinking about what we'll talk about next in the event, and when, no, not if, when we're able to begin to disarm the people who are committing crimes using weapons against us. When we're able to do that, we need to have a plan in place for what we will do with the confiscated weaponry. And some of it can be pretty sophisticated. So, anyway, but he's got a gun giveaway here. Who knows where he got his, but okay. If I just do this, could you pause it?
Yeah, you want to play some more?
Yeah, please.
Tom? Okay, so we've got some suggestions, and again, we get reader, viewer input on things like this. There's 3 things you should never do if someone breaks into your home. And the 3 that we got on this list were: you should never leave your safe room, you should never let the bad guy know where you are, and you should never speak to this without first consulting with your attorney. I really like the last one, and I'm probably sure that you agree with that one. First talk
for the
to your
most
attorney.
part.
For the most part.
For the most part.
Yeah, there's some areas to help, but in a home defense scenario, we're getting this suggestion that you should never leave your safe room. First of all, I really don't like those absolute terms, never and always, and things like that. There's somebody's going to be watching right now and say, well, what if your safe room's on fire? Okay, then we might want to leave.
They're never right, and they're always wrong.
Yeah. That's why we have you
That's
around,
That's why I'm here. I'm the color guy.
Yeah, so never leave your safe room. That's an area where I'm going to take a little bit of umbrage with that right from the beginning, because every situation is different. It's dynamic. What are you protecting if someone breaks into your home? Is it a burglary while you're asleep? Is it a home invasion while you're awake? Where are your kids? Are you going to protect your pets? I mean, there's all sorts of crazy ideas going on here. So what do you think about that concept of never leaving your safe room?
Well, I think it depends where it falls in your plan. I mean, for myself, as a dad with young children, I can't imagine just locking the door to my bedroom and saying, well, you guys are on your own. That doesn't even compute to me. That being said, if I live alone and if my bedroom's a good place to be, and it's protected, and to the point where if there's a fire, I can reasonably escape from the window, and now you're starting to talk some sense to me. But it really depends. What's the cover? What's the concealment? Do I have a good vantage point if I'm right-handed? Am I looking around a left-hand turn?
That's exactly what I'm thinking about as we go through this, because and I'm talking about, first of all, I don't have a house with a safe room. I have a house with a safe space where I want to go and defend if somebody breaks in. Coming up to the top of my stairs, my bedroom where I am gives me only a left-handed shot around the corner and down the stairs. So I need to get out of that room, move across that hallway so that I can be leaning out, shooting with my right hand. So I'm going to have to leave my safe room to get across into my position for my self-defense. And I think this is something that, again, like you said, never right, always wrong kind of thing, that it comes down to your personal protection plan. What do you have in your home that you can use to best protect yourself? And in those cases, I really don't want to get into an always and never point of view.
So. Right. I mean, at the end of the day, I think to the way I think about it, there's a hierarchy of values.
Look, I'll cut the malarkey. We're facing the critical.
let's.
Okay, let me skip over the commercial here.
Yeah. You'd think it'd be enough that they had that staged so-called debate on who your next slave master is going to be tonight. So we're competing with that. Keep that in mind, folks.
Well, gosh, I got that. I'm recording that for later entertainment.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to add that this is kind of dated because, of course, if you're in a safe room, particularly if it's not a Faraday cage, with sophisticated or not even that sophisticated equipment now, they will know exactly where you are. So with heat-seeking technology, they'll see where the living bodies are. So I don't know if I don't think they ever defined a safe room. What would that be? What would that look like? And what would it have? And ideally, it would have a Faraday cage. It would be a Faraday cage. So, all right, are we going to come back? Can we come back to that, Frank?
Yeah. 1 second.
At least they're talking about people having a plan. That's good. And a lot of people maybe don't even think about it. But it's a different plan depending on who your attacker is. And they don't take that into account here. Go ahead.
But here's no exception. There's a hierarchy of values of, I want to protect, my children's life, my spouse's life, my life. After that, there's a significant drop off, and maybe people will slide a pet in there at some point. Maybe not. Some people may
You're
try
going to get calls.
I'm going to get calls
from the dog lovers.
I didn't say don't. I said
Yeah.
some people may do this and some people may not. That's on them, not on me. So, and maybe for those dog lovers, I was talking about cats.
Okay.
So, that's
I'll accept it.
I left that. All right. The flag's been picked up, folks.
Yeah.
The flag's been picked up. And some people may try to slide property into that. I wouldn't. I'm not going to throw my life away or to risk throwing my life away to protect, a computer or a big screen TV. I mean, I'm not saying it's fair or just or that I'm going to feel great about listening to somebody ransacking my house. I'm sure that we would all have a natural impulse to intervene, but there has to be a construction of that hierarchy of values, and higher up from all of that is protecting my family and lives, not stuff. So to the extent that a personal protection plan fulfills and protects those values and upholds those values, okay. If that means that I stay in one spot, so be it. I'm not convinced that every single contingency leads to me staying in one spot, however.
And you said something that leads us right into the next part of this question is you're sitting there listening to someone ransack your house. The other absolute in this statement, this viewer comment was never let the bad guy know where you are. And I'm going to say right now, I absolutely disagree with that. I want the bad guy to know that I know he is there. It's always a he. It's very rarely the female burglar or home invader coming in. I want that bad guy to know that I know he is in there. And I want him to know where I am so that he can stay away from me. Because if he chooses to come toward me, well, he's getting the gun bullets first. But if he chooses to stay away from me, yeah, it sucks. He's ransacking my house. He's taking my TV and my real good bottles of whiskey. He'll probably leave the cheap stuff. But that's, to be very serious about this, in a home defense scenario, one, I tell people not to go room clearing from room to room. And two, I tell them not to do it in the dark and not to be sneaking around. We're not, snipers sneaking up on a high value target or something like that. What we're trying to do is get the bad guy to go away and not hurt us. And if at all possible, we don't have to hurt him because that doesn't, that just opens up a bigger can of worms. But I'm going to shout out. I'm going to say, hey, I know you're here. Get out of the house. I've called the police. don't come any closer, whatever it is I can do. He's going to know where I am, and I want him to know that so that he doesn't come near me and I don't have to shoot him.
I think some people, yes, for starters. I think that some people misconceptualize what winning is. Winning to me is not blowing away the bad guy. It may come to that, but it isn't, or at least at a minimum, it doesn't start there. It's forced there.
Yeah.
Winning is escaping the situation with the least harm necessary to myself or frankly anyone else. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to advocate pacifism or something like that. But I've seen what using a firearm in self-defense can do to the good guy's life, to their reputation, to their business, to their family, to their future. I think people, for understandable reasons, you read books, you watch movies, TV shows, and you watch the good guy, the righteous, defend themselves and defend their family and their homestead from the bad guy attacker. And if it isn't glamorized, it's certainly upheld as being virtuous. And I'm not trying to say that it isn't virtuous. But what those TV shows typically don't show you are the years of gritty, greasy court battles and fights and the sleepless nights and the stress and the eating disorder that know your kid develops because of every.
Yeah, well, that's because of the system that we've allowed to subjugate us. If we're defending our homes, we should not be the ones being prosecuted. But we know in the system we're in, and that he's talking about, and that he's a part of, that they will make the victim be punished. So that's another reason why, particularly if you're afraid of a home invasion from people who work for the Cabal, as well as anybody else that might be a contractor of theirs. They've got a lot of confidential informants that do their dirty work for them. They've got paramilitary people who do their dirty work for them. If you already have in place a judgment that allows you to confiscate their weapons, as a matter of fact, if you have a judgment that allows anybody who reads the judgment to disarm stated people, respondents in the judgment, then you've got at least some protection against what the scenario that this ex-prosecutor, defense attorney is talking about the demonization of the guy defending his family. So, I don't know. Y'all are welcome to listen to the rest of it. Let him finish his thought, and then I'd like to move on as to what else we're doing, and why we can enter judgments that would disarm large numbers of people, really. So let's let him finish his thought.
Everything and just they don't show you that side of it. And I'm not trying to say that every single time turns into that, but that is the roll of the dice. So winning for me is least force necessary for the least harm necessary. And if it's pushed to a choice between myself or my kids and the bad guy who decided to be an uninvited guest at 3 a.m. with their knife or gun, that's not a choice I made. That's a choice that they made. But to the second point of announcing yourself, I do think that people. So the reason why I said that is because I think people kind of anchor on this idea that I've got to win the fight. The better way of winning the fight is not to have one.
Yeah, the best fight's when you're not in.
Right. So to the extent.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, he's got some good points there. I wanted to get into a little bit about what we're faced with now, not only if we defend ourselves against street criminals invading our homes, that we might be deemed the bad guys, but the fact that we can also have our homes invaded by the people who supposedly are there to protect us. And there's a couple of their corporations that most people don't even know are corporations, but they're private-for-profit corporations, as we've said many times on this broadcast. Some of them act as if they were child protective services or some such name, or social services, or the leading case on that is from the United States, their United States Supreme Court, not ours. And it's DeShaney versus Winnebago County. It's a Wisconsin case, or it was, and then it went up to U.S. Supreme Court there. They determined that this was a family in which the parents apparently had already murdered one of their children. Okay? So they were going to leave the rest of the children there. That's what they do. Okay? CPS. And I don't know on whose behalf the original lawsuit was brought, on behalf of the child, the second child who was murdered in DeShaney versus Winnebago. But they said even though the murder and the second child was being abused, and it had all the earmarks that this was going to be a second murder. Of course, you can never, predict these things with absolute certainty. But in any case, I believe that the United States Supreme Court said the people on there, yeah, it was foreseeable and everything, but they don't have the people that work at CPS don't have a duty to the child to have protected the child from being murdered. They have no duty to protect, and that makes sense in their world because the people who work for CPS work for a private-for-profit corporation, and the purpose of the corporation is to make money, to make a profit, generate revenue, not protect anybody. So just because they didn't, it wasn't their job. And of course, there's several other cases from their United States Supreme Court and the D.C. Court of Appeals, in which there were home invasions. There were 14 hours in which 2 men held 3 women hostage, beat them, raped them. Twice, the victims were able to get away and call the cops. Cops never showed up. And the subsequent lawsuit against the cop shop ended up in a higher court, so-called court. It's not really a court either. It's also a private-for-profit corporation devoted to revenue generation. So they also decided there is no duty to protect or serve. So what are you complaining about? They could walk right past you as you're being stabbed to death, as you're being raped and murdered. They are quite within their rights to go on down the street to the donut shop. And that's because they have one purpose, one duty to the fictitious entity called a corporation whose other agents sign their paycheck. And they have that duty to generate revenue. It's not going to generate any revenue in particular to go out and risk some of your employees getting themselves involved in some sort of a fight that initiated by people who are armed with who knows what, even though the so-called cops have all this elaborate equipment, military type equipment, and that doesn't seem to be enough to enable them to go out and actually protect or serve. It was around, I think, the time that these decisions were coming out that the logo on the side, protect and serve, started to come off because it was just too big of a joke to leave it on. So, we know that they don't have that duty, but they are in fact becoming the perpetrators of home invasions. We have on this broadcast, and I'm going to just set the stage for Melissa. She's told me in advance that this is okay with her. And she could use a little help in forming a common law court there in Minnesota, not state of Minnesota, in Minnesota. But in the meantime, while that's in the works, she's in the process of serving a first notice on a group of people that pretend that they're her government. And she was involved in a bad divorce and not realizing that the so-called court that took charge of that divorce was also taking charge of the welfare of her children, which they have obviously they have no duty to protect or serve those children. So it doesn't make any sense that they would be taking that on. But they're not big on consistency. So one of the things that happened in her case, and I won't, everybody's got a horror story, but this one I thought was particularly bad. Okay, on September 26, 2023, before she had, this was around the time, this was a little bit after she had been informed that her child was being molested at her former husband's house by another child. And it was being filmed. She was a little upset. At the time, she thought she could call CPS and they would do something. But watch out for what you wish for. Turns out, of course, CPS just made a bad situation a lot worse. And then, other corporations that are also feeding off the public became involved. So on September 26, 2023, agents of a man by the name of Cater, who has a job working for one of those so-called law enforcement agencies that doesn't enforce law, that only enforces corporate policies. And the corporate policy is always make more money, make more money. So anyway, he was enforcing that policy. And understand that part of the generation of revenue for these so-called, police agencies is to earn revenue from contracts with the corporation that we think of as the federal government. And so when they have those kind of contracts, and they've got to fill those contracts. You understand? They've got to have they've got to have warm bodies that they are housing in their dungeons that they are getting federal funding for. So, on this particular day, Cater's agents, and remember, in common law, you serve or really even in their law, you serve the man who's in charge of a bunch of other criminals, and they kidnapped her. They had cuffed her. They tortured her, and they took her to a dungeon-type facility known as the Anoka County Jail. They were looking for her medical information, and be aware, of course, that that's another way that they generate revenue. Because when they traffic people, and that's part of how they generate revenue, part of the trafficking involves the dissemination of people's medical information so that they can be experimented upon for profit, of course. What else is there? So they started going through her purse, no telling what they took, stripped her naked while she was menstruating, forced her onto a concrete floor, deprived her of drinking water, deprived her of bathroom use, and telephone contact with the outside world. Okay. At one point, one of the attackers amplified the torture by threatening her that if she moved, she would be tasered. When later they did release her, and she requested records to identify the attackers. But of course she had to request the records from one of them, one of their administrative clerks. They always have fancy titles. But she surprisingly refused to disclose the records of the attackers' identities. And I don't know how many of you all are noticing that not only if you go into their facilities that we used to think of was a public courthouse, a public this, a public that, you can hardly get more than a few steps in if you get there. And they don't want to talk to you. They don't want to. You can't just walk in. I remember a time, I just walk in. I'd walk through the courtroom, walk to the back, talk to the judge. I was, a bar member at the time, but, other people got pretty close to doing that themselves. And then, of course, 911 happened, and then that was a reason that there had to be all kinds of security in place. You had to go through metal detectors, and then it just went from there to worse. When she requested the records, of course, they were denied. Now, Melissa is here, and she's in the process of forming a common law court for Minnesota, and she's also in the process of serving the people that were involved in this. This is what Sabrina Wallace calls lawfare. It's where the so-called legal system is used as a weapon, and this was used, and they combine with the medical system sometimes, and they combine with social services and private social workers and psychologists and, of course, bar members run the whole thing. And they do that by making everything so complicated that only they can supposedly help the person trapped in this system to find some sort of a way through the maze, which somehow people trying to find their way through the legal maze never find their way through it, and oftentimes don't understand that it's their own attorney that's making that impossible, because the more confusing it gets, the more they can charge. And that's what it's about, revenue generation. Anyway, so Melissa, do you, I don't want to ask you too open-ended a question. I don't want to put you on the spot. I did want to commend you for your courage in being here today, and as well as to stand up for yourself and your child, who is, maybe a more primary target even than you have been. And a lot of people think that, and of course, you're scared. We all have reason to be afraid, but actually, by going through the system, we're seeing some signs that the people that are being served with these notices, who are becoming aware of them, are starting to drop their big bad exteriors, and they're starting to go the other direction. They're starting to run from us, basically. So that's not. I don't say that so that anybody's going to get cocky about, oh, we're winning. I'm only saying that there is some reason to be hopeful, but mostly be hopeful if you are moving forward into, not into their system. No, that's a way of danger. No, but if you deal with the people that they're using against you, you deal with them, man to man, man to woman, woman to woman, woman to man, then you're using the process that God created in Matthew 18:15 through 17. You let them know what they're doing. You're letting them know you want to resolve it, and this is how you want to resolve it. If they ignore you, you let them know. If you ignore us, if you ignore the facts in this notice, they will be deemed to be admitted, and the facts are under oath. If you can't dispute these facts, also under oath, then you've admitted them, and that's true in God's world, and it's true in their world too. And after a second and a third notice, if they default, then they are entitled to be treated as we would the heathen. And that means no Fifth Amendment grand jury process. And it also means, and part of the relief that she is asking for is, since they're at her home every day, harassing her and threatening her, is one thing to be trespassed against. It's another thing when it's an armed trespass, and that's exactly what it is. So a first step for us is to disarm the people who have no duty to protect or serve us. That if they have no duty to protect or serve, what are they doing with firearms? Okay. Did you? I wanted to ask Melissa if she had anything to add. You can unmute yourself.
Sure. No,
Yeah.
I'll turn it down.
I want to go ahead.
I just put it in the chat. They made the case disappear after I had the first appearance, which was, I was told by the court-appointed attorney that if I would plead not guilty, then I could see the judge. Otherwise, I'd be sitting in jail longer. That's what I was told.
They had some sort of a trumped-up charge that went with all the tasering threats and the.
Yeah, this was basically unlawful arrest because I was not served papers. I did not know that my going around the property because I was around the mailbox, so I wasn't 2 blocks away. But I've never met this woman that has the HRO on me, which is harassment restraining order. I've never met her.
Okay, all right. Yeah, you're doing what people generally do.
Yeah.
And that is that. Oh, I'm innocent. I didn't commit one of your corporate offenses that aren't offenses anyway. You don't have to do that. They have no business and no authority to be prosecuting you anyway. Let's don't dignify what they're doing as being a false arrest.
Yeah.
Because it's not an arrest would be something that would be done by a legitimate authority, someone who is lawfully acting. They're not.
Yeah.
So, and I wanted to bring up one of the other ways that before you get your thinking adjusted so you understand who the bad guys are and who they are not.
Yes.
One of your process servers got flummoxed a little bit trying to serve a clerk at the public courthouse.
Yeah, it was a CPS agent. It was a CPS agent.
It was a CPS agent?
Yes,
okay.
It was.
Okay, yeah. So, and they're probably, well trained in how to avoid receiving any paperwork for any of the evil that they do. So they went on the attack like they like to do, and threatened him that he had to have a process server's license from them, and that they're not calling the shots. Once you start to understand they're not calling the shots. Now, that doesn't mean they can't pull out a firearm and just shoot you down. For whatever reason, they don't seem to be inclined to do that under circumstances where they would be criticized for it or where it would get bad press. That wouldn't be good for revenue generation. But he apparently, and I wanted to talk with him before he did that, before he served the process. It doesn't matter what they say. People don't like to be served documents. We've had people, threaten to hurt the process server. We've had people start screaming and jumping up and down on top of the papers, throwing them to the floor. And in one instance, and it was a CPS gal too, she started running. This was in California a few years ago. She started running from the process server, and he ran after her and tossed the papers. She was wearing a hoodie, and he tossed the papers in the back of her hoodie behind her head, not touching her, but she marched over to the corporate so-called prosecutor's office and demanded that the process server be arrested. So for battery. Anyway, it was ultimately dismissed, but I had told him that probably it's not a good idea to think you have to place these documents in someone's hand. As long as they can see that you've got the paperwork and you toss it in their general direction, you're probably good to go. And of course, he seemed like he was doing that. But also, when they charged him with battery, he was fighting it in their system. So it could have turned out I think it could have been better if he'd done it differently. But anyway. All right, so you're going to have this or another process server complete the process, and I would remind people there is such a thing as the mailbox rule. where you can go to their corporate post office and leave, and I suggest using a certificate of mailing, not certified mail, not registered mail. A certificate of mailing proves that you have left an item of mail in which you identify, in which they rubber stamp with the date, proving, and they give you the certificate right there. They give it back to you, and you have proof that you have delivered that item of mail to the postal clerk, their postal clerk. So what happens to it from there is none of your business, because they have a presumption that once it's left with their postal clerk, it's received in the normal course of postal commerce. So I think that's probably the most painless way of getting process served. However, there are times with a first notice especially, I like to make sure that it's delivered in person to at least a few of the people. And remember, every time you serve Joe Blow, you've served Joe Blow's agents, his underlings, and you've served Joe Blow's superiors. So that's part of what you're going to be dealing with. Now, if part of the notice informs them that they have no duty to protect or serve, and it also tells them that you are seeking, as we're doing in a matter in Ohio as well, you're seeking to disarm them. You're seeking a common law court order that will enable anyone who receives the order to do whatever is necessary to disarm these people, and that are named in the order. Now, are we ready to do that today or tomorrow? Probably not. But there will come a time that we will be ready with the help of God. And then we will have a document that will support us in that. We will, instead of being labeled as insurrectionists or rebels or any of the insults that historically the enemy has liked to level at us, we will have a court order that they themselves have acknowledged as, really beyond reproach. If they could have reproached it, they would have. Anyway, I think I can speak for Melissa that as well as other people I know in Minnesota who are similarly being targeted, because state of Minnesota, like the state of Ohio, like the state of anywhere, is involved in child sex trafficking and other forms of child trafficking and human organ trafficking and all kinds of stuff. And that's a big part of why they're doing what they're doing, the immediate reason. And if we're at a point where we can start to get serious about this and what we need to do, and that we need to disarm the enemy. And I wanted to point out, too, that God has some very specific statements about that. And, of course, the enemy's armaments are part of the booty that is recovered when you have to go into battle with him or her. Take up the whole armament of God, that you may be able to withstand the evil day, and having done all to stand firm, stand therefore having fasted. Okay. there are parts of Scripture that do point out that taking the enemy's weaponry is something that God's people have done for centuries. And then they use it themselves, or they use it for other purposes, so they use it for peaceful purposes. In 1 Peter, verse 5, having disarmed principalities and powers, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them. Be sober-minded, be watchful. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world. For those who want to look at this again, 1 Peter, verse 5, chapter 5, verses 8 through 10. And Colossians 2, verses 14 through 15. Anybody have any suggestions as to what would be done with the confiscated weaponry? I think there's some Bible verse about beating swords into plowshares. Y'all still there?
Yeah, I'm just muted.
Yeah. Go ahead. Just jump in. I'm looking at the chat box, see if there's anything. Anybody from Minnesota out there wanting to call in or post something on the chat box? Anybody from Ohio interested in being part of our court? We have a court up and running, Ohio Circuit Court of Record, www.occr2021.com. He's commented, everyone is watching the so-called debate. This is the debate, tonight, between two pedophiles, okay? Incest perpetrators, to be specific. That might not be fair. A true pedophile has their primary sexual orientation with children. An incest perpetrator, on the other hand, may molest children, his own, or children in the family, is more of an exercise of control rather than as a primary sexual orientation. But we have plenty of evidence as to both of these candidates, or whoever it was that they're making clones of, whatever that is, that they're both incest perpetrators, or at least they fantasize about incest perpetration. Frank, you want to comment on Follow the Money?
Well,
is it always about money?
I don't know, but I'm just starting to learn how to look up who people are. Like this was a few talks ago. You talked about a sheriff and looking him up in Dun and Bradstreet. and finding out that there is a connection with the corporation. And the corporation's mission statement is also, if I can find it, it's also interesting to read.
Oh, really?
But it seems to me the purpose of the corporation is for insulation of the individuals that are working for the corporation. Or at least that's one of the purposes.
Yep.
And I'm sort of guilty of that myself because I have a corporation, but it's sort of the idea that's promoted is, hey, you have to have a corporation because you have to insulate your personal assets.
But what are you insulating them from exactly?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I was following an attorney's advice, so I was kind of doing it blindly and not understanding what are the implications and how that could be used against me.
Yeah, I got the same spiel when I went into business, renting out houses. Yeah, you got to do this. You got to be incorporated so it'll insulate you from liability. From what if they slip and fall and they sue you for everything you have, and well, you know what? I've been in that business for 20 some years, and none of that has ever happened. In the last 3 or 4 years, I've stopped doing business as a corporation. I have no insulation. I have no insulation from liability, but I feel much safer because I know that the weapon, the legal weapon that they would use in their fake corporate tribunals, don't have any authority over me. I kind of learned, really, it's taken me about 40 some years, but I finally learned that, once you really call them on what they are and their lack of authority, they can't deny it. It forces them into the position of, well, we have to just come out and let it be known that we are, in fact, just a bunch of criminals. And yes, we will admit that, we're extortionists. We'll admit, because they've already done that. When you do the 3 notice process, they admit these things. It's an admission in their world. They don't like to say that it is, but it is. Yeah. A trespass is really a general term from the Middle Ages that applied to any violation of rights. You can trespass on someone's land, which is what we usually think of as a trespass, and there are consequences for that. And when they admit that they have trespassed, then you can get you can get them to agree that they're going to compensate you. It doesn't matter who is doing the trespassing. At the end of the day, underneath their costumes and their badges, they're just people, aren't they? And do they get any greater rights because they've got the corporate hat on? What's a corporation? A corporation is a mental construct that can be put on paper, and it can be treated as if it's really something. It really exists, but it doesn't. It's a mental construct. Yes, it exists in the same sense that evil exists, betrayal exists, love exists, all kinds of intangible concepts exist in a sense mentally, but they don't exist in the same way that I exist because I have blood flowing through my veins. I'm a creation of God. I'm real. I can move my arms and legs, and I have a mouth to talk with and a brain to think with. A corporation doesn't have those things. It's nothing. It's an it. It's a concept. So you can, I mean, like Donald Duck is a concept. Donald Duck is a character that that was used to generate a lot of income for a corporation known as Walt Disney Enterprises, or whatever they called themselves. But you can't really say, I'm here on behalf of Donald Duck. Well, you know, it makes as much sense to say, I'm here on behalf of the Anoka County Sheriff's Office, which is a corporation, if it is, or maybe it's doing business as Anoka County of, or whatever they're doing business as. They can show up that way, but does that give the man underneath the costume and the badge, does that give him some kind of authority he didn't have without the costume and the badge and the mental construct that they call a corporation? No. If he calls himself Donald Duck, does that give him the authority of, Walt Disney Enterprises? Or I'm gonna accept this call and see if I can get Rose on. I think that's who it is. Rose, can you hear me? Can anybody hear me still?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm hearing you, Kathy.
All right, thank you. I don't know if Rose was able to get in or not, but she doesn't seem to understand about clicking on the link. Anyways, yeah, so, Frank, back to your point and the advice that you were given, same advice a lot of people are given. You got to get a license to be in business. You got to be incorporated to be in business. You got to pay for this and pay for that and get an attorney and no, you don't. People have been selling land to each other, giving things, trading things with each other, entering into marriages with each other without any kind of paperwork, without that they have historically, according to the Bible, gone through ceremonies, and they have had witnesses to what they've done, but they have not seen the need. I think it came about, I don't know, in the Middle Ages, this notion of a straw man, which is another legal fiction, and it's just, or a corporation. It's a way to, it's a criminal tool. It's a way to do something in the name of some other entity so that you won't be in trouble. And how's that going to work out? You going to get the blessings from God by doing that? No, I don't think so. And the other thing is, if you, so you're trying to insulate yourself from liability. So if you harm someone while you're doing business, and you're saying, I'm doing business as Donald Duck, as a corporation, you say that you're doing business as a corporation, then you can hurt people, and you quick take the assets out of the corporation, and then all they have is a lawsuit against the corporation, and they can't get anything. This is what a lot of people are finding now, that they want, and I better be careful how I talk about this, because we're dealing with a corporation right now in this transmission. A lot of people became upset when loved ones began to die as a result of injections with a poisoned instrumentality in the arm. And some of them, I know of two, I've learned about one, a new one tonight. They think they're going to be assertive. They're going to they're going to be proactive. They're going to file a lawsuit against a corporation known as PFIZER or some of the other ones, and they're going to get some money, at least enough money that they can take care of their disabled loved one, perhaps, or they're going to get something. The lawyers and the expert witnesses might get more of it, but what they didn't count on in this particular case, too, is that the buddies of PFIZER, their buddies who are running other corporations with names like Government of the United States with an address on Pennsylvania Avenue, that's what it's called on Dun and Bradstreet, that entity, or one of the 6 corporations doing business as if they were Congress of the United States of America, one of those did a deal with PFIZER or others, where PFIZER's agents could manufacture and sell and make profits off all the poison they ever dreamed of manufacturing without liability. They would be given legal immunity. And at least that's what they said. So if you sue the corporation, these people that are doing that now, there's a guy named Scott Scherer, and there's another woman whose daughter was not killed, but she was disabled from the product that this corporation puts out. So they're going to have legal immunity, aren't they? But what about the people who are running those corporations and the scientists that were contractors for these corporations? What about the ones that were promoting the products? What about everybody who had their hands in this filth, that aided and abetted? They didn't get immunity, I don't think, did they? No. In fact, the corporations doing business as if they were Congress of the United States didn't have authority to give anybody, any people, immunity. They could only give immunity to another, mental construct like themselves, a corporation, a big pharma corporation. So that's what they're going to find out. They go into the system. They agree that they're going to do all this pretending that corporations are real when they're not. They're going to find out that they've just spent a lot of time and money, FRNs anyway, on something that's not going to work for them. It's not going to hurt the people who hurt their loved one. Let's put it that way. And it's not going to compensate them. So, yeah. As Melissa comments, they think they have no consequences, and as Keith says, there are many. When you deal with the people, you betcha the people have consequences, and no corporate format and no bank of attorneys is going to change that if you're dealing with them outside of the corporate tribunal. In other words, the people's common law courts. They've admitted this, Chisholm versus Georgia, among others. The people are the source of all law, all earthly law, and our Heavenly Father, of course, is the author of all law. I've been talking way too long, and I don't know that I've, gotten anybody necessarily thinking about what we would do, but I want people to at least think about what would it be like if we disarmed the enemy and we had authority in writing to do that. from a non-corporate court of the people. So, well, we've been at this for going on an hour and a half. So, if anybody wants to contact me about becoming a member of the Ohio Circuit Court of Record, I can be reached at 614-633-0215. That's 614-633-0215. Or my email is wljaradio@aol.com. And anybody, particularly in Nebraska, in Minnesota, in South Carolina, New York, I think those are the main states I've been hearing people talking about putting together a common law court, which I will help you do. And you know, we're here to save our lives, and I'm in a position I don't have to charge anybody anything, thanks to God, and so we're here to help each other, and I encourage you all to do that, and don't fear man. Don't fear man. No weapon devised against us will prosper. So hopefully we'll be back again, God willing, in another 2 weeks, or at least the second Thursday of July. And actually next week, on the 4th of July, at 10 a.m. Eastern, I'm supposed to be on Sabrina Wallace's broadcast. So y'all may remember she's the one that has informed us about a lot of the electronic weaponry that's being used against us, and which I understand very little about, but I do understand that if there's a solution, an earthly solution, it's going to be found within us as God-fearing people. So, thanks to everybody, and we'll be back again on the second Thursday of next month. Hope to hear from you. Thanks a lot. Good night.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Frank.